They say a house has a heartbeat. For 40 years, I knew exactly where the heartbeat of this home was. It was in the creak of the third step on the staircase. It was in the faint smell of cinnamon that lived in the kitchen curtains. It was in the height marks penciled onto the pantry door, showing exactly how fast my son David grew into a man. But this morning, I woke up and I couldn't hear the heartbeat anymore. I walked into the hallway, and the walls were a cold, flat gray. The marks on the pantry door were gone, hidden under a thick layer of fresh paint. My grandmother's lace doilies were missing from the side tables. Even the air felt different, sterile, like a hotel room where no one has ever truly lived. I stood there in my slippers, looking at a large modern mirror where my family photos used to hang. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me, and I certainly didn't recognize the home I had spent my entire life building. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, came down the stairs then. She was holding a cup of herbal tea, looking polished and bright. She smiled at me, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. It was the smile of a manager checking on a guest. "Good morning, Margaret," she said softly. "Doesn't it look so much cleaner now? All that old clutter was just trapping dust. We need to breathe, don't we?" I wanted to tell her that the clutter was my life. I wanted to tell her that the dust she hated was the remains of the dreams my husband and I had built together. But I just tightened the belt of my robe and nodded. I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want to lose the only thing I had left, the chance to be near my son. I didn't realize then that you can lose a person even while you're sitting at the same table. I didn't realize that when she painted over those pencil marks on the door, she wasn't just decorating, she was erasing me. I remember the day we bought this house. It was 1982. My husband, Arthur, carried me over the threshold, even though I was already 6 months pregnant with David. We didn't have much furniture then. We had a mattress on the floor and a small radio that only picked up 2 stations, but we had so much light. Arthur was a carpenter. He spent his weekends fixing the molding and sanding the floors until they glowed like honey. He used to say, "Margaret, a house is just wood and stone until you put a story in it." And we put so many stories here. When David was born, the house filled with the sound of soft lullabies and the scent of baby powder. I remember the kitchen table, the one with the heavy oak legs. That table saw every scraped knee, every difficult homework assignment, and every birthday cake Arthur and I ever made. After Arthur passed away 10 years ago, the house became my companion. When I felt lonely, I would touch the banister he had carved. I would sit in his study and feel his presence and the lingering scent of old books and peppermint tea. The house wasn't just a building, it was a museum of my love. 3 years ago, David met Sarah. She was a high-powered designer from the city. She was beautiful, sharp, and very organized. When David brought her home for the first time, she looked at my floral wallpaper and my collection of ceramic birds with a strange expression. I thought she was just impressed by the history. "It's very cozy, Margaret," she had said, her eyes scanning the room like she was calculating the square footage. When they got married and David suggested they move in with me to help take care of the property, and because they wanted to save for a vacation home, I was overjoyed. I thought the house needed new life. I thought I was gaining a daughter. I told them the house was theirs as much as mine. "Make yourselves at home," I had said, opening my arms wide. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't know that to Sarah, making herself at home meant making sure there was no room left for me. It started with the small things. One Tuesday, I came home from the grocery store to find my spice rack gone. I had used that wooden rack for 30 years. My mother had given it to me. "It was so greasy, Margaret," Sarah said, as she unpacked a set of identical glass jars with minimalist labels. "These look much better on the counter. I put your old things in a box in the garage." I felt a small sting in my chest, but I pushed it down. I told myself she was just trying to be helpful. She was young, she liked things modern. Then came the living room. I came downstairs one morning to find my velvet armchair, Arthur's favorite spot, gone. In its place was a white, angular sofa that looked like it belonged in a gallery, not a home. It was hard and cold. The velvet was shedding, Sarah explained, not looking up from her laptop. And the color didn't fit the new palette I'm going for. We're going for minimalist calm now. I went to the garage that evening. I found my chair under a plastic tarp. I sat in it for a while in the dark, breathing in the faint, fading scent of Arthur's aftershave. I felt like a guest in my own life. Day by day, piece by piece, the house changed. My lace curtains were replaced by heavy, dark blinds. My collection of family photos in mismatched frames was moved to a digital screen that looped images of Sarah's travel photography. My son didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't want to speak up. Mom, Sarah has an eye for these things, David told me one night when I mentioned the changes. Let her have her fun. The house looks great, doesn't it? It's finally looking modern. But David, I whispered, where is the us in this house? Where is your father? He just patted my hand. Dad is in our hearts, Mom, not in an old rug. I realized then that Sarah wasn't just changing the furniture, she was changing my son's perspective. She was teaching him that the past was a burden and that my memories were just clutter. I started staying in my bedroom more. It was the only room she hadn't touched yet. I felt like I was retreating, losing a war I hadn't even realized I was fighting. The breaking point didn't come with a shout. It came with a quiet afternoon in October. I had been out at a doctor's appointment. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw several cars parked along the curb. There were tables set up in my front yard. People were walking around, picking through items. My heart began to race. I saw a woman holding my silver teapot, the one we used every Christmas Eve. I saw a man loading Arthur's old workbench into the back of a truck. I ran to the yard, my breath coming in short gasps. Sarah was standing there with a clipboard, looking professional and calm. "Sarah, what is happening?" I cried out. She looked at me with a practiced, sympathetic tilt of her head. "Oh, Margaret, you were gone and I didn't want to bother you. We really needed to clear out the garage and the attic. We're turning the garage into a home gym and the attic is going to be my new studio. We can't have all this old stuff taking up space." "This isn't stuff," I shouted, my voice trembling. "These are my things, my life." I saw my son standing by the door. He looked uncomfortable. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "David, do something," I pleaded. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "it's just things. We're starting a new chapter. We can't keep everything forever." At that moment, I saw a young couple walking away with a box. Inside that box was the handmade quilt my mother had sewn for me when I got married. I ran toward them, but Sarah stepped in my way. "Margaret, please, you're making a scene," she said, her voice dropping to a cold, hard whisper. "You said this house was ours. You said we should make it a home. This is what a home looks like to us. If you want to live here with us, you have to let go of the graveyard you've been living in." The graveyard. That's what she called my life. I stopped moving. The world felt very still. I looked at the house, the gray walls, the modern furniture, and the empty spaces where love used to sit. It wasn't my house anymore. It was her house, and in her house there was no room for an old woman with a heavy heart. I didn't fight her anymore. That afternoon, I went to my room and I locked the door. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, cold clarity. I realized that Sarah hadn't betrayed me. I had betrayed myself. I had stayed in a place where I was being erased because I was afraid of the dark. I spent the next week quietly. I didn't complain when she painted my bedroom dove white. I didn't say a word when she replaced my old quilts with a weighted gray blanket. I just watched. I watched my son become a stranger who talked about property value and aesthetic instead of family and history. But I was also making phone calls. I contacted my old friend Eleanor. She lived in a small cottage by the sea, 3 hours away. She had been asking me to visit for years. "Eleanor," I said into the phone, "is that invitation still open? I think I'm ready for a change." The day I left, I didn't bring much, just a suitcase of clothes and a small box of photos I had managed to hide under my bed. I didn't tell them I was leaving for good. I just told them I was going on a trip. As I stood by the front door, Sarah looked at me with a satisfied expression. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally polished the house into the perfect empty vessel she wanted. "Have a nice time, Margaret. We'll have the guest room ready whenever you decide to come back." I looked at my son. He looked relieved. He thought the tension was finally over. He hugged me, but he felt like a shadow. "I'll see you later, Mom," he said. "Goodbye, David," I said. I made sure to say goodbye, not see you later. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The house looked beautiful from the outside, perfectly landscaped, perfectly painted, but I knew that inside it was hollow. Sarah had replaced the memories, but she hadn't realized that memories are what hold the roof up. Without them, it was just a box. It has been 6 months since I moved into the cottage with Eleanor. My room here is small. The floors creak and the windows rattle when the wind blows from the ocean. There is no minimalist calm here. There are mismatched mugs, stacks of books, and the constant, messy sound of laughter. I realized something important. A home isn't the walls you live in. It isn't the furniture you buy or the color you paint the kitchen. A home is the freedom to be remembered. Sarah tried to erase me to make room for herself, but in doing so, she lost the most valuable thing in that house. She lost the story. She has the house now, but she will never have the home. Sometimes David calls me. He sounds tired. He talks about how quiet the house is. He mentions that Sarah is already planning the next renovation. I listen and I offer him love, but I don't offer to come back. I've learned that you cannot force someone to value your history. You can only choose to take your history somewhere it will be cherished. If you are listening to this and you feel like you are being erased, whether by a daughter-in-law, a job, or a world that prizes the new over the old, remember this: your memories are not clutter. Your past is not a graveyard. It is the foundation of who you are. And if the house you're in doesn't have room for your heart, then it isn't your home. Go where you are seen. Go where your stories are heard. Because at the end of the day, we aren't remembered for our aesthetic. We are remembered for the love we left behind in the creak of a floorboard and the warmth of a hand.